So I really love how you come into my room. You get right to work. You make such a positive environment here, and I also really love how you don't just help your special kiddos, but you'll help anybody that you see struggling. And it really sets a more co-teaching environment in the room because they know that you're here to assist everybody in math, and they really have established that you're another helping teacher in the room, and it's really nice. And my favorite part was when you made that rounding mountain and had the kids actually round the mountain, and that might actually come into handy for this lesson because when they recall strategies, they might need that or want to use that. So that's great. So tell me about the lesson you're planning on temperature.
Well, we're going to have a little talk on the carpet. I am going to pull up this really cool image where you can move the temperature around on a thermometer and it changes the picture next to it, and it has pictures that correspond with what the temperature is. So when you have it on 0 degrees Celsius, it has ice, but when you have it on 80 degrees, it's like a next day at the beach. So that we're going to use that to sort of show them in general what the temperature tells us, and in general where temperatures are sort of in experiences that they understand.
That sounds really, really cool. So what's the big idea that you think the students will learn with this lesson?
That they can use a thermometer to determine what the weather is going to be like outside, and to help them know what to wear. And they'll also get an opportunity to go off in groups and have a picture of a weather scenario and use their own little thermometers that they've made in science to determine what temperature they think it would be like outside based on the picture that they have.
Nice. So the big idea math-wise, using the thermometer, what ideas are you looking at?
Oh, well, so they're going to practice their rounding that they've already learned. They're also going to practice reading a scale. But rounding, I think, is going to be the big skill that they're bringing back up again. But measurement as well.
Right.
Yeah, measurement being the biggest one.
But as we noticed in the pre-assessment data, rounding was the thing that so I noticed in the lesson there wasn't a number sense routine yet. How do you feel? I know you're not in my room during number sense, you're usually in Quiz's room, so how do you feel about starting the math block with a number sense routine?
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, totally.
How comfortable are you leading that? Or do you remember that time I used estimation clipboard where they went through the slides and it kind of walked them through different estimations using the first image? There's one with measurement that I'm going to introduce starting tomorrow where they have to estimate the length of a string.
Oh, okay.
So they would still be doing the string on that day, but you could relate it to how is measuring length the same and different with temperature, and kind of build their connections on the 2 days before on length to launch the lesson. So how do you feel about that?
I think that would be a great idea. I think that's going to be a great way for them to make a connection.
And how comfortable are you leading that, or would you rather that be like a co-teaching moment, or you would like to try to take the lead? How comfortable are you with that?
I think if I get a chance to see the string tomorrow, I think I'll be totally comfortable leading that.
Awesome. Yeah, and that makes sense because you are with me, so you already can see like the co-teaching moment of how to lead it, and that can cue you in tomorrow, and then you can in the next give you the reins when you lead.
Yeah.
So I like that idea. So I noticed you also mentioned a few times how you would really like to guide students. When we did the circle of values, you like to guide them through their thinking and lead them in the right direction. So what questions do you think you might use during the launch of the lesson with the pictures that change with the thermometer?
I might ask them to relate it to experiences that they've already had. So when it pulls up a picture at the beach or pulls up a picture of people in coats, ask them to remember and think of a time when they wore clothes like that or experienced something like that. so that they can take the number that's on the thermometer and relate it to a real life event that they're familiar with. I also might ask about, I might try to, if I can, like cover up the picture and move the thermometer and see if they can make an estimate of like, would we want to be outside in weather like this? Like if without being able to see the picture, if it's on 0 degrees, do we think we're going to wear a coat or a t-shirt without them using the picture as a guide, just to see sort of where they're at as well.
And are you going to connect rounding to that?
Yes. So we'll definitely, we'll practice the rounding a little bit, like as a group. So when I put it at, maybe I'll put it at 65 degrees, or different ones say, okay, well, if we were going to round this to the nearest 10, where would we round it? Just so that they can get the practice and the modeling as a whole group first before they take that and practice it on their own.
And how would you record students' responses during that?
Well, we could do a chalk talk, and we could record the writing like on the board. Like we could have the numbers written on the whiteboard, and as they sort of give those answers, we could record as well, like what they think that the answer is going to be. Like, is it going to go up to the 70 or down to the 60?
Mm-hmm.
So,
do you think they might use different strategies for that, or the same, or maybe a rounding mountain might come out? What do you think?
I think they'll probably use a bunch of different strategies. That's something I've noticed a lot in this class, that kids really use a really large variety of different strategies. I don't know if the kids are going to go out and get the mountain and try to bring that up and try to use that, but I think they'll definitely have different ways that they determine which way to round, for sure.
And if a student gets stuck, do you have any idea what questioning you might use to help guide them through that?
I think if a student gets stuck, one of the first things I like to do is I like to ask maybe for a helper, like another student, but also using that visual of like the number line, or I could draw the number mountain or the rounding mountain and show them where it is based on, and ask them after that.
So you would show them a strategy first?
Yes, I could show them the strategy first.
Okay. I have that I made. I don't know if you're interested. I made this back when I was doing a professional development last year.
Oh, awesome.
About teacher-suggested questions and prompts. It's from the article Using Questions to Help Children Build Mathematical Power.
Oh, cool.
And help them get through their own productive struggles, or even help them rely more on themselves to come up with the strategies. If their estimations seem reasonable, or what do you think should come next? Just different ones to help guide the kids through their productive struggle, instead of first jumping to tell them a strategy, but to have them explore it themselves. I don't know if you're interested, if you want to look through that.
Yeah, this is great. Because sometimes in the moment, the questions don't necessarily come to mind.
Right.
And I don't want to like show them exactly what to do, but having these will definitely help sort of prompt that rather than just do it for them, or show them this is the right strategy to use, or this is the only strategy to use. So this is great. Thank you.
Right. And then if you want to remind them, remember back when we did rounding and I showed you something, and see if that helps prompt. Or yeah. So are there any questions on here? Do you think that would be relevant for this activity?
I think when some of the students are getting the answers, or they're not getting stuck, having that question of what do you think helped you decide how to get your answer will help the other kids sort of get that ball rolling. Like, what do you think you should do next, I think is a good piece. So like following those steps. There's a lot of questions on it.
Yeah, I know. It's a lot. So go ahead and
yes, I will look
use
over
that
this.
if you'd
Yes,
like.
I would love that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that sounds good for the launch and the of the lesson. So let's talk more about the actual activity when you send them off in groups. How would you like to group the students?
I think heterogeneously it would be useful to group them that way. I've noticed that your students do really, really well in heterogeneous groups. So.
And how many pictures do you have?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 5.
Five. So 5 groups would make them a little smaller than their normal math team groups. So I think that would also help. So how would you like the students to record their thinking when they're in groups around the picture?
I think using the exit ticket that we're using as a team would be great. So I have this here.
Oh,
this
so
is
So you would want them to do that during the activity?
Oh no! I'm sorry.
Okay.
I missed.
Yeah, when they're in groups and they're looking at the picture. How would you like them to record their thinking?
Well, I've noticed sometimes when you do the groups, you have them just have sort of a large piece of paper. I think maybe having that piece of paper with an empty thermometer on it, and then they can talk about, like, they can fill up or they can draw a line where they think that the temperature will be up to, and they can write numbers if they'd like. So, like, it can come with a scale of like 0 to 120 or however high they usually go, 100. And they can color into how high they think the temperature is going to be, and then why they think that the temperature is going to be there versus lower or higher.
Yeah. So kind of, do you remember that time, I know you mentioned chalk talk. So it could be like a chalk talk around the picture, and they can record what they notice and wonder. We use that strategy a lot. Yeah, that sounds good. So more like the chalk talk. So who do we need to consider might have difficulties with this activity?
Well, I can definitely think of some of my kids that might have a little bit of trouble, but I think it's more just the staying on task and during both the launch and the actual group, the chalk talk as well. So I can. Do you want me to name the students who I think?
You don't have
to.
Just keeping them in mind, because
yes.
the next question I was going to ask, which might be a little bit more challenging for you because you don't really work with these kids as much, but who do you think this lesson might be too easy for and might need a little extension?
I can think of a couple students who probably it'll be a little bit too easy for. And a possible extension would be if they can relate it to, like, if they can relate to science and weather, they could try to do that. They can add that sort of piece to it. They can try to think of examples of times, like, change the thermometer around, or like they could think, well, okay, if this is about 65 degrees or 70 degrees, then can we draw a picture or make a scenario of what it's going to be like when it's 12 degrees outside? So sort of using what they see in this picture and then relating it to a different temperature, and then creating the image from that different temperature.
That's a great idea.
Thanks.
For those kids also, maybe relating it to the rounding somehow, or putting in a problem-solving question.
Yeah.
Even at the bottom of the page, because even though those kids might access that problem, if they say it out loud and talk about it, it still brings in the other kids
Yes.
who might struggle with the problem by themselves, but just talking about it and hearing the discourse. So maybe just adding a problem that says, so based on the temperature you thought this picture was, you woke up the next day and it was 20 degrees less. What would the temperature be now, and how do you know?
Yeah, I think that would be,
and then for your other kiddos on the other end, how do you think we can differentiate for them?
Well, I was thinking about different ways to differentiate. I think the fact that they're using a picture and they're relating it directly to the thermometer itself, I think is a great sort of, it takes the language piece out of it, which I think is especially great for our English language learners. I think for our kids who are struggling, I think having them in the heterogeneous groups is going to be great to show them sort of expose them to the thinking of the other students as well. like I said, with my kiddos especially, I've seen that they really do thrive in those groups because they have the examples to watch and learn from, and they have students who are working with them and helping them and showing them, like, as they go through. So that's definitely going to help as well.
Yeah, I think the lesson already kind of opens it up.
It does.
All
It
entry
is.
points
Yes.
for kids.
Yeah.
For our ESOL students, maybe sentence frames just to
Mhm.
help with them to enter the conversation.
Mhm.
Like, I think the temperature is blank
Mhm.
because we
Mhm.
can put that on the table to help
Yeah,
with that.
absolutely.
And also, I have the vocabulary wall already up for science that they're
Oh, great.
used to
Yes.
help those
Mhm.
ESOL students. Maybe refer to this during the launch
Yeah.
to help them just make connections with science and using these words
Mhm.
when they're having the discussion with their table.
Absolutely. I think this will be really helpful.
Great. So how are you going to, if when you're walking around, assist the students that are having difficulties and challenges?
What I usually do with my kiddos who are having a little bit of trouble is I work with them and try to bring them in the conversation, so giving them a little bit of confidence. Sometimes I'll offer something for them to suggest if they're having trouble coming up with things to suggest, and then prompt them further from that so they have a starting point and then they can move in from there, because I think sometimes, especially when kids have trouble, they don't know what to say in the discussion, so it sort of stops them from joining because they're like, well, everybody else kind of knows what they're talking about and I don't really know what to say, so I'm not going to say anything. So giving them that jumping off point is usually really helpful for them.
Do you think maybe the sentence frame can already
Yes.
assist with
Yes,
that?
yes, that also for sure.
Yeah, and also maybe instead of telling them exactly, refer them to the vocabulary wall
Mhm.
because there are picture clues with it.
Mm-hmm.
Say, is something on this wall help you think of this picture that you can connect with, and something like
Yeah,
more
absolutely.
like that.
Mhm.
Do you think any of these questions might help those kids that get stuck?
Yes, for sure. I mean, some of the ones that that you put on here are awesome for that. Like, how does this relate to? Have you ever? What says have you ever solved a problem like this before? But have you ever seen weather like this before?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what it's like, the weather like at your house right now, relating to things that they're familiar with. Yeah. I think
Yeah,
there's
those are
definitely a lot
great
of suggestions.
examples of ways that you can lead them to think of the ideas themselves
Mhm.
without exactly
Exactly
telling
telling them.
them.
Mhm.
Yeah. So what about the students that are need a little bit more challenge? There's actually a section on that. How to help foster the reasoning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Helps challenge the kids, or making them apply it to different areas of mathematics and making
Yeah.
connections.
Like, how does this relate to addition and subtraction? When the problem is on here, have you ever solved a problem like this before? I think those are definitely great questions. Writing a story problem that uses this kind of math, so a different story problem based off the temperatures that they have that are different from the word problem that might be here. So writing a different one with the same numbers. Yeah.
Do you see any misconceptions the students might have? What misconceptions might they have with this activity?
I can see some students finding just a number that's sort of in the middle and then just using that for everything. So like 60 degrees, everything is 60 degrees.
I didn't think of that. That's, yeah.
Especially when they're maybe not understanding necessarily the concept of what's being measured. They also might think that we're measuring the weather versus the actual what the temperature is outside. So they might say sunny, and sunny might be a different reading to them than cloudy or something like that. And where sometimes that does relate to the weather and temperature. I think that might be a misconception, is that they think that we're measuring how light it is outside or something like that. I think. I think those are the two that first come to mind.
Yeah, I didn't think of those. That's great examples. The ones I thought of is the scale on the thermometer to point out the one we use there versus the one they might be using in the activity.
Yes,
that to pay close attention if it's counting by tens or twos or fives, and that can be confusing.
Yes, yeah. And if the cutoff is different, like if it cuts off at 150 degrees versus 100 degrees, where it's going to be on the thermometer is different then. So.
And another misconception that you might not realize just because you're not here in science is the math standard only focuses on Fahrenheit. But in science, we introduce both Fahrenheit and
which is
Celsius.
confusing. Yeah.
So they might have a confusion about that or seeing a thermometer with both on the sides and having to explain that.
Yeah.
How do you think we can work on be ready for those misconceptions if they come up during the lesson?
I think as far as the one is picking the same temperature and sticking with it all the time, I think the slide scale for the image is going to be really helpful. That temperature is different every day, so that they understand that the temperature changes all the time. Like even throughout the day, in the morning the temperature is different from how it is in the afternoon, so that they don't try to just rely on picking just one. We can't just pick just one because it changes all the time. As far as like making sure what they're measuring, not sure. I mean, I think maybe talking about if I see a student who's struggling with that, talk about how it can be sunny but cold. It can be sunny and hot. It can be cloudy and hot. It can be cloudy and cold. And just sort of talk about, that would probably be something a little bit more one-on-one depending on who's struggling with that.
Yeah.
And then as the scale, like I think starting out with the Fahrenheit versus Celsius and having both, since we are doing this activity in math, if they see one that has both, maybe starting off by covering up the Celsius and just having them look at the Fahrenheit, because that might confuse them enough that they're not sure which one to look at, and they're writing the wrong numbers, not because they're misreading the thermometer itself, but that they're reading the Celsius versus the Fahrenheit. So for those students who are going to struggle with that, and then probably pointing out the scale as far as like counting by tens versus counting by twos.
During
Just
the launch.
just pointing out that it's going to be different and to really pay attention to that so that there's not that confusion. And I think since they're going to be in the heterogeneous groups, that there will hopefully at least be one person per group that'll kind of keep that in mind while they're writing their temperatures. So.
Sounds good. Sounds like you have a plan. So how will you assess the students' learning through data collection?
So now I would probably use this exit ticket. So essentially, it's just a little thermometer, and it has it up to 75 degrees. And they are supposed to read the thermometer and round the temperature up to the nearest 10 degrees. But I'm going to have them write the 75 in the small box first, and then they round here. And then they are able to, so that they show the understanding of how temperature relates to the environment, draw a picture or write about what the weather would be like, or what would it be like outside in 75-degree weather.
So you said, that looks good. You said that the big idea for the lesson is to use the tools to determine weather and the rounding and reading a scale and measurement for weather. So do you feel like this exit ticket meets those objectives and big ideas of the lesson?
I think so.
I do too. I think it covers both reading the scale and the rounding, and you have the box for their strategy, and then creating a picture on it as well. I think that looks good. So I really do think this sounds like a great lesson, and it has lots of opportunities for students to participate in discourse and showing different strategies for rounding or how they estimate and make temperature on the thermometer. I think it aligns nicely with the values you shared with me during our first meeting about students are collaborating, using critical thinking skills, they're building a deeper understanding of temperature, they're building connections, And I think you're now, especially looking over those questions, really prepared to foster their thinking with questioning
Yeah.
and guiding and discussion and helping them through that productive struggle. So I think it sounds good. Do you have any questions for me or?
I don't think so. I think it's gonna be fun. I think we're gonna have a good time.
I do too. Oh, I do have one more question. Do you want any co-teaching moments, or do you want me to jump in if you feel like I should add something, or how would you like me to be present?
I think that if I'm forgetting something or if I'm explaining something in a way that you think could be explained in a different way or in a better way, I'm happy for you to make eye contact and you have something you want to add. I'm happy for you to add that while I'm teaching as well. But I'm happy to lead and get it going, and then when the students are practicing, just facilitating, and we can facilitate together.
Okay, that sounds good. So, eye contact, or do you want a signal, I'm gonna come in?
You can do a thumbs up.
Comfortable with?
No, that's fine. Do a thumbs up. That's awesome. Yeah, it might be a little bit more clear than eye contact. Yeah. So.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for meeting with me, and I look forward to Thursday.